Check them.
Setting my soul on fire. Whatever it is, whatever it is, whatever it is, it won't let me hold my peace. Makes folks say I'm acting strange. What is it? Makes me wanna run on these days. Whatever it is, whatever it is, whatever it is, whatever it is, it won't let me hold my peace. I said it makes me love all my enemies.
is it? What is it? Made you come here today, thought about it. What is that? On all these many occasions when we come together, whether like this or in your cooler groups or just casually in a restaurant somewhere, it's always about trying to find out what is this. Because every day you want to quit the path, you see. And you try sometime to quit it, but something about this that once it get a hold in you, once it that seed is planted, it just makes you do things, even when you don't want to. You see, how many really want to meditate? But there's something about this that makes you get up anyway. Don't you know? It's mysterious, unfathomable, inscrutable, but yet palpable, tangent, but concrete. What a great mystery this thing is. Well, we're not going to figure it out, so relax. It's something that can't be figured out. Can only be relaxed into, accepted, lived. But you won't be able to form any kind of real concrete ideal of it, you see. So what would you rascals like to consider today? I'm in a decent mood. I'll be nice, promise. Yes, beloved.
Master, can you talk about prana, or breath, as it relates to consciousness, life, and death?
Wow. How many days we got? Well, a couple of things you have to understand first. To appreciate what the saints and sages have had to say about prana. You have to understand that prana is just a word indicating another dimension of our being. We exist in many dimensions. In the spiritual tradition, at least in India, they have gave names to these various dimensions in which we exist. You remember the gross dimension of our existence, this body. It's been called the Anamaya Kosha. That's the dimension of the gross, the physical. That's just one dimension of our being, an aspect of what we are. It's usually that aspect that we most identify with and even limit our sense of self to that identification with this Anamaya Kosha, this gross physical material dimension of our being. The next dimension, you see, is the Pranamaya Kosha. That is the dimension of energy. Breath is a part of that etheric dimension of our existence, you see. More subtle, less gross, but equally a part of us, you see. I might want to point out that these dimensions that I will briefly review with you are just different states of energy. That's the first thing you have to understand. And as energy is stepped down, at its lowest level, it becomes gross to body. The next step in that evolution of energy is prana. Beyond prana, there's the maya kosha, because we have a dimension that we exist in that is mana. And then, according to the saints and sages, there's the Janamaya kosha, you see, and then the Anandamaya kosha. And I'm not going to bore the song out with all of the details, but I know you're familiar with that schema. So, when you live in the dimension of prana, fundamentally you are conscious of your energy in the form of breath. You see, just like you always notice in your bodily state, your feeling state in the body, where you hurt, where you're uncomfortable, etc. When you are able to live at a deeper dimension, you are very conscious of your breathing. You see, this being conscious of your breathing actually is a new level of consciousness. You see, because you're becoming conscious of something about yourself that is more subtle. Hence, you are operating in that moment at a higher level of consciousness. You see. And so that's a kind of short answer to the relationship between pranayama yoga, the yoga of conscious breathing. You see, itself produces a higher level of consciousness. And that's why you'll find in many spirit traditions, some of the basic forms of their sadhana is in watching your breath. It's been said that the lifetime of this physical body is measured in terms of breath, because breath, or prana, is the energy level of your being, the etheric level of your being. It is the source that provides the energy for this body. So when you run out of breath, this body is over with, you see. In fact, if you really consider things, prana, or breath, and it's really not breath, I should correct that misunderstanding. Breath is simply the transportation vehicle. Breath is simply the vehicle through which prana is taken into the body. Prana comes from the etheric dimension of your being, you see? And by breathing, we bring this energy that is prana into this body to sustain it, you see. But itself is not breath, you see. It is that which breath conducts into the physical in order for it to be sustained. And when you consider things, beloved, you will find that this prana, this etheric energy, you can't live but a few minutes without that. You live a long time, relatively speaking, without water and food and so forth. But when prana stops, this thing ends, because prana is the energy source for the physical and so forth. But then you see, mind is senior to prana. That's why when the body drops, you see, prana has been removed, you still go on. You see. So it can get a little complex, but hopefully that'll give you some insight into it. You actually follow your breath through conscious practice in order to begin to observe even the mind, the thoughts, the mental dimension. You see, it's like you're aware of your breath. The next level is to become conscious of your thinking, continuously conscious of your thinking. So you can be conscious of your thinking. And that then gives you a whole different level of consciousness, you see, because you're taking in more of your being. You can consciously participate in the process, you see. Just like you can consciously breathe, you notice that? You can either consciously breathe or unconsciously be breathed. You have that option. Or you can automatically think, or you can manually think, to put it in a different sense, you see. But that requires that you have risen to another level of consciousness, and so forth and so on. And then even beyond mind, you see, there's attention itself, attention, attention, and just to be conscious of your attention gives you another level of consciousness and so forth. The ideal is that we are to live in all of our dimensions. Where's the cooler of grace? There's a few of them. And that's what you all have been considering reading, the Eternal Castles piece by Carolyn Miss, where she is sharing with you some of the teachings of Saint Teresa. You see, when Teresa is talking about entering into your castles, those are really dimensions of your very being that is available right now. You see, and in some sense, the whole purpose and function of sadhana is to get to know yourself in your totality. You see, doesn't mean that you stop operating in any of your dimensions. The physical dimension, we continue to operate in that physical dimension. But none of us have any business of being exclusively confined to just that physical dimension of our being. There's no reason for that, you see. You live in many dimensions, you see. And the more of your own dimension you can live in, the more full your life becomes, you see. And so then there's that Anandamaya culture, the culture, that dimension of bliss, you see. Happiness, peace, and all of those things that you're looking for. Well, that is something that happens when you begin to move into deeper dimensions of your own being, and you realize that, one, you're not confined to a body, you have a body, you see. That's an aspect of your being, you see. And there's a kind of joy that you get in just discovering that you have other dimensions that you exist in, that is in no ways interfered with when the body drops. And that fills you with a little bit of joy. What do you think? It makes you happy to know that death is not the end of it. You know, that's just one aspect of my being. So it's sort of like that. This is not exactly like that, because I've just said before, this thing is inscrutable, you see. It's unfathomable. There's no way for the intellect to even comprehend the immensity of who and what we are. Your intellect cannot understand you. Please make a note. That can't happen. Beyond its grasp. You are something as mysterious, you know, as the stars, you see. You can live in it, but it becomes unspeakable. Something else about it, beloved?
So can you say that prana is what is the animating energy?
In some sense, it animates the physical. Everything is energy. Consciousness is energy. Consciousness equal MC squared. Everything is energy. And everything that we are experiencing is simply a modification of that energy that is consciousness. And there's only one consciousness, you see. Ordinarily, when we are confined in our dimensions to just the sense of being this body, it creates the illusion that there's independent bodies and independent centers of consciousness, like there's the feeling that your consciousness that you're experiencing is different from hers, and yours is different from Sabrani, and Sabrani is different from Bilal, and so forth and so on. That's not true. There's only one consciousness, period, that is simply manifest, being modified in all these variety of forms, you see. It's just energy. Conscious energy. Prana is just one of the stages of that energy being stepped down. Because if you have no physical body, why do you need that? You don't need any prana, but you exist. You follow me? So it's just a stepping down of energy. But it is very useful, and that is why pranayama yoga has oftentimes been made a practice. It need not be the only thing. More subtle than prana is shabad, sound. Energy at the level of sound is more subtle than prana. You see? And even in the Buddhist traditions, when Buddha talked about his satipatthana, you see, his 4 foundations of practice, he starts with breath. But Buddhists very often forget that's the starting point. That's not it. It's just it's where you start by observing the breath. You are then trained to begin to observe more and more subtle things. You see, then the breath only takes you so far, you see. And so many Buddhist practitioners are stuck at the level of just watching their breath. You see, that's not it. You know, you'll get familiar with the energies and so forth and so on, but there's many dimensions to your being that you'll never even have access to, you see. In the Vinaya Dhamma that the Buddha gave during his lifetime and living, you see, he always moved those schools beyond that elementary level of practice. In fact, he taught us a kind of shub yoga, you know, a yoga of sound. That's why if you read the Nikayas and you read the Pali Canons, you'll hear very often in those sutras them talking about hearing the roar of the Dhamma. You see. Now later on, they reduced that to hearing somebody repeat the sutras, but that's not what was heard by a Sariputta or a Mahakasyapa. You see, they heard the roar of the Dhamma, the sound of the Dhamma, the Shabda. You see, so Shab then is an even more subtle thing than breath. You see, it's a more subtle form of the same energy. You see, so before there's breath, there's Shab. If you have that kind of sensitivity to be conscious of Shabad, of sound, then you arrive in a higher level of consciousness than you would by merely watching your breath. So all of these things are quite interesting. And so much more can be said about it, but those are some of the technical remarks I can offer you. What else would you rascals like to talk about? Yes, beloved.
Yeah, beloved Guru Sahib, you had mentioned the different levels of our being, the dimensions, and you mentioned the very first one, the Anamaya Kosha. I want to say, why is it that we can only realize the creator or the oneness of consciousness with that particular dimension?
I'm sorry, I don't quite follow.
Now I want to say that you mentioned the Anamaya Kosha, meaning our physical vehicle. Why is it that with this vehicle, that's the only dimension that we can realize this oneness?
Only dimension in which you can realize the oneness of consciousness?
Right, with this physical vehicle.
Usually, as long as you're confined to that dimension, you don't realize the oneness. It's just the opposite. You know? When you are confined to this gross dimension of your existence, the identification, the exclusive sense of self of being this physical body, you are not having the experience of oneness. That's why in the teaching they talk about you must rise in consciousness above the body. Nobody is having the experience of oneness confined and limited to a sense of identification with the body. Nobody's having that. You're having exactly the opposite experience, you see, right? Because you feel your body is separate from my body and so forth and so on, right? That's the fundamental sense you have. You see. In space and time, your experience, you know, is one of separateness in space and time. Is that about right?
Yes, sir.
You see. And that's because you are operating in that most basic and lowest level of your dimension of being. So the experience of the oneness of everyone and everything is way beyond the identification with the body-mind as being all that you are. See, it's an aspect, no doubt about that, you see. But that's not all that you are. Now, even from a point of view of science, you see, the same elements that make up your body are the same elements that make up this body. But you're not having the experience of our bodies being the same, because you are confined, you see. You can't get to that experience of oneness from where you're at. You have to move. This oneness, I keep wanting to say it's not even an experience in the sense that there's something that has to happen in terms of phenomenology that hasn't happened already. This oneness is the case right now. You see. These saints and sages, beloved, they're operating from a level of consciousness, you see. But what is being experienced is the same as what you experienced. The Buddhas, the Kabirs, the Lao Tzus, so forth and so on, these mystics, the experience of the many that you're having, they're having it too. The difference is that they know that the experience of the many that they're having is just a modification of the one. So this experience of oneness is more related to this tacit understanding and realization. You know? When the Buddha was asked, what did you get from all those years of silence? What did you find under that bowl tree? What was it? And Buddha simply replied that there was no, lights and going off and all this stuff. And I said, well, what has happened to you that is so different? What is this enlightenment? And Buddha says, it's no different from what you experience. I'm simply awake. There's a tacit understanding, you see. It is difficult to try to capture in words, because remember, we're talking about something that technically is beyond the intellect. The intellect is not going to get it, you see. So you're not going to ever really quite appreciate the testimonies and confession of these mystics through any kind of exchange of words and ideals and concepts, because it's completely beyond that. But it's like having a third eye. I guess that's the best term, where you can see something that the two physical eyes cannot see. Now we give some real basic example. For instance, I've used the example in the past of you go into a pottery shop You see all these different pots, they're different colors, different sizes. And without a third eye, you're only seeing differences. You see, this pot is different from that pot. But with a third eye, what you are seeing is something that goes beyond form. And you see, this is all clay. You follow me? You still have this division of the many, but in the many you see the one. You see, enlightenment is that state of consciousness where you can see the one. You understand it's just one.
So it's a thing of awareness.
It is understanding.
Intention.
Yes. It's like if I take this cloak off and I cut it into 1,000,000 pieces, right? Right? And I pass it out of here. And you start saying, well, your piece of cloth is different from Gurudasa piece of cloth. That's ignorance, you know? And you're only saying it because you didn't see the beginning. You see my point? You don't have the big picture. You didn't see me cutting it up. You follow me? Well, your body is just a cutout. You see? Your mind is just a cutout. Your individual consciousness that you experience, that's just a cutout. It's just a piece of one consciousness, one mind. It's more like that. So the enlightened experience is the same as this one, with that one big exception. You know that there is no difference. This is just various modifications of one consciousness. You see? It's not like, well, my consciousness is similar to yours. You see, it is the same consciousness. You see, it is identical. Because there's only one consciousness being manifest in a variety of forms. This thing that as we've stumbled upon, this path, this is so profound, you know, I mean, really, it's really, really quite profound. And I am continuously amazed that, you know, even this many of us are able to really, how do I put it, hold up under the profundity of it all, you know? I mean, it's almost like, it's so profound, it almost takes on the form of a myth, you know? I remember when I was growing up, I used to wonder, did people like Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad, did these people really, I mean, it sounds almost like a myth. And, you know, it's like this just, it's too hard to believe that something like this is the case, you see? You follow what I'm saying? This path, this nam, this way, this dharma, is so profound, you know? In fact, that was one of the things that it is said Buddha realized about what he had awakened into, that this state of consciousness, this ability to see the one in the many, he said that this is such a profound state, you know? And when he was asked to go teach this Dharma, you know, his initial response was no. He said, this thing is way too profound, too deep, too gabira, too profound, you know, hard to understand, almost impossible, you know. He said, how can I teach that which is unteachable, you know? I mean, he was not at all interested in turning that wheel of Dhamma, you see, because the probability of one human being even understanding it was so small, because it's so profound. Buddha said you almost have to be enlightened to understand this, to begin with, you know. And he said that, and if I should go and try to teach this Dhamma to the ordinary man and woman, you know, knowing that this is so profound, they can't even understand it. He said, I will grow weary of it. You know? It'll wear me out, he says. You know, he said, but thank God, you know what I mean? For whatever reason, he turned that wheel. But his story is the story of all of the saints and sages. You see my point? This thing that we have been given is so profound. It's way more profound than you can even comprehend, you know? This is what you're trying to do is hard. This is difficult. This is not a piece of cake, you know. This is not religion. This is not philosophy. This is not psychology. You see, this is not science. You see, this is Gabira. You see, this is deed. This is Sogai. Difficult. You know what I mean? Very difficult. What we're trying to accomplish here has been accomplished by very, very, very few people. You see? Very few. I mean, it's really something. It's really, really something. It almost is attempting the impossible. It is really something, you know. I'm at loss for words. You know, I don't mean to be dramatic here, but it's hard to not be dramatic in an effort to try to really communicate to you the rarity of this thing. This is something. This is something. That's all I can say. This is something. You know, this is something. Yes, brother.
I want to say it's definitely about a need that you would need to have an experienced teacher. You know, you'll be taking on something that's nearly impossible to accomplish. You know, you have to have a guide.
Yeah, in that sense, because to keep you motivated because you're quit. You're quit because you said this is impossible. I mean, you know that from our own experience. You sit there on that mat, you close your eyes, and you're trying to concentrate, and you see it's impossible to concentrate your mind. My mind, you know what you said. You got a kind of mind that you said this is impossible. I quit. You know, or I'm gonna just go through the motions and so forth. But you understand what I'm saying? Seriously, you know, it's really something. And without the support of a friend, right, to keep telling you it's possible. It is possible. Yes, keep going. It's possible. Don't give up. But our experience is, I'm tired, man. This is hard. I've been doing this shit for years and I ain't going nowhere. And life has passed me by. I could be making some money and so forth and so on. And the admirable friend said, no, keep going. Keep going. Don't quit. Keep pushing, you know. Otherwise, we quit. Because this is Gabira. This is deep. This is deep. You know, this is deep. This is nothing like anything you have ever encountered. You see, this is different. This is deep. You know what I mean? It's the deepest knowledge there is that is available to us. You know, and this thing is deep, very deep. You know, it requires much seriousness, much profundity. More seriousness and profundity than most people are capable of, you see. That's why Buddha says, you know, it is futile to teach this Dhamma. It's just futile, you see. Now, Buddha got, for some reason, he got had, you see my point? Because many sages and mystics who see the same thing do not teach. There's been far more Buddhas that have refused to teach than there have been Buddhas that teach. Far more realizers that have simply refused to even embark upon that attempt than there are gurus that you read about. Far more Jesuses have refused to give that gospel. It is too difficult. You know what I mean? You see, to beings who are confined in their sense of self to the gross dimension, it's almost impossible for the gross dimensioned being to even understand. Those living in the confinement of their gross dimensions are not even interested in it. Living in the gross dimension of being, you are interested in money, food, sex, bodily comfort, etc., etc., etc. They're not even interested in it. You can understand how difficult it would be, you see, to try to teach into that context. And then those who are living in confinement in their energy level of being, the etheric level of being, you know, they're into their emotions and feelings, you know what I mean? They're just lost in that, you see, chasing emotional states. It's all there. Does it feel good? Don't feel good. That's it. You know. They're seeking emotional fulfillment. That's the dimension they're in. So forth and so forth. Even though and these dimensions, really, I can't even say that they are anything other than lower astral levels of your being. The lower astral level of your being, that includes the body, your feelings, your prana, your mind, your thinking. All of those all belong to the lower astral. It's not even higher astral. I mean, this is, you have to understand, look at this mystery at this place. I mean, what is this? I mean, where did all this come from? Why is there anything? Why is there anything instead of nothing? I mean, come on here. This is mysterium. This is mystery going on here. You see? And you're trying to relate to this mystery by knowing it and figuring it out. You can't figure out a mystery. Your existence is mysterious. Mysteriously, you are here. You don't know how, you don't know why. You see? So I'm talking about something that is way beyond rational. You got to go beyond logic to even get a sense of what's going on. You see? There is no rational way to understand this at all. That's why you get caught in a do loop when you're trying to rationally figure it out. You're in a do loop. I don't know, do they use those terms anymore in computer science? When I was studying, we talked about a do loop. You're just constantly turning. You're not going anywhere. Because you're trying to figure out rationally what is beyond rational thought. Just mystery. You're just a modification of consciousness itself. Here today, gone tomorrow. Just a modification, fleeting. Just, you follow what I'm saying? And we're trying to understand this thing from the point of view of a modification of it. I mean, even this language now becomes cumbersome, vague, almost begin to sound like gobbledygook, you know, because you can't talk about this too much. I'm trying, but I'm not going to succeed. You see my point? So you just kind of got to feel it. Yeah. You know what I mean? You just got to try to feel it. Yes, beloved. Gone already? Okay. Yes, Dayasa.
Want to once again return to the subject of death. And just yesterday we had a funeral for a staff person who worked out of this office. And therefore, myself and my wife and other close associates, we interacted with this individual every day. But he developed a terminal form of cancer, and I was just reflecting because, you know, this time last year, he was a regular personality, daily chit chat, share stories about life. But as his vitality, I guess, began to wane, he isolated himself from everyone, and it got to a point where he wasn't even taking calls. He'd ask who it was, and depending on the person calling, you know, people who can be sympathy, or I've missed you and all that. I guess he didn't want to even talk about it. I kept trying to put myself in his place and try and feel what it was he was going through. Of course, it's an exercise, and I don't know, maybe just postulating or what have you. But I never got to talk with him again once he decided to leave the firm and go home and die. I'm sorry if I'm making this too long, but just yesterday we had a funeral for a man who I didn't know at all, but his stepdaughter gave remarks during the funeral, and I'm so glad I was in the last seat of the church because I was crying my ass off. She did, something opened up, and she described this individual, this deceased person. It was just stories of valiant love, unanimous love, how he sacrificed, how he gave. I'm sitting there and the tears are streaming down my eyes, and I'm trying to wipe them. And I was so focused on myself, but when she finished, I looked up and people all over the church were trying to dry their eyes. And here's my point. This wasn't an enlightened individual, I guess, in that sense, that she studied the Dharma or anything, but she went to a place that she was able to forge some kind of a union, I guess, with everybody in the audience. And it also made me think back to when we had our death and dying initiative at Cedar Park when we were doing the hospice. And I still try and figure out today how come it collapsed. And I still work with hospice groups, and I hear fantastic stories. But I'm going to stop there because it's this aspect of this unanswered about personality, about death, and that who we really are, who we might be, in the sense that we could communicate. Everyone, I guess, possesses the quality to communicate with one another in such a way as for hearts to open. And some practice all the time on how to do it and experience varying levels of success. Others go to a depth of suffering, I guess, and what opens up just right away just moves and brings everybody in together. I don't know if you can comment on what it is that I'm really trying to say.
Well, of course, whenever you venture to that territory, you venture into the realm of the mysterious, and who can say really? We can speculate, but that's just it. It's just speculative, you see. Not having been a witness to the occasion, I'm at a disadvantage, you see. But we all, by virtue of being human beings, share certain kinds of experiences, I'm not quite sure how to begin to explain that phenomena. You mentioned that everybody was touched in the room, including yourself, right? And I can only speculate, therefore, that you all were somehow, for a moment, connected to the loss. Somewhere inside yourself, you were realizing your condition. It's hard to You understand the concept of morphic resonance, beloved? A little bit? Okay. It's you're familiar with mirror neurons, beloved? I'm just throwing these pieces out today to solve particularly, because I know you'll go back and do the research, because it would take a lot more time than we have to really get into that. But you can account for the collective phenomena through the fact of mirror neurons. You see, how we feel other people's feelings, you see. But tell me, what broke your heart about it? And this way, I think we will be able to make some sense out of it, because there's nobody else here but you who were there to experience. What broke your heart, beloved?
So many things.
Yes. But what broke your heart on this occasion?
Stories of love always seem to do that.
Stories
They
of love.
warm, they have a warmth about them, and you see people who are not maybe wealthy in money terms, but they're wealthy in their ability to sacrifice on the welfare and growth and business of others. And it seems to be what we really all want. So when you hear somebody who does it so good, it's an aspect of grace, and maybe, it reconfirms, some of your own thoughts and feelings. But as I said, it had a mass effect. So many people, maybe somewhere within all of us, as you kind of indicated, there's a spot there from which we operate, but it seems to be more or less closed over or suppressed, repressed. I'm not sure.
Well, it seems that we all are vulnerable to love.
Yes.
Right? That's what it seems, don't you think? That there's something in us.
And if I may add, you can say you love somebody, but then we can say it in such a way that it's genuine. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think what you see, though, beloved, is there are people who love beautifully. And then there are those who do no loving. Those who love ugly and so forth and so on. But there seems to be something about the experience of those who love so beautifully that touches all of us. It melts the heart. You follow me? To see to see love, you see, is itself a spiritual experience. Because it does something to you. So maybe we should talk a little bit about that. Because saints are saying that love itself is a kind of state of consciousness. There's something beautiful about the spirit of sacrifice for the welfare and the benefit of another human being. There's something beautiful about that. These acts of love, you see. Now you were touched by that. Somewhere deep down inside, that means you want to love like that. You want people to say that about you when you're laying in the coffin. You see? Something in you wants that to be said about you. You see, something in us recognizes that, my God, you see, if I don't live my life in a way that it can elicit this kind of response at the end of your life, that you have failed somehow. You know what I mean? You want to have that kind of value in the life of others. You know what I mean? You see. And then, you know, in the same instance, however, you're realizing that, man, you know what I mean? With the loving I've done, you see, the way I do love, no, that's not going to happen. You know, there's an element of sorrow in the tears. Have you noticed? You see, it's not a giddy kind of thing. You see, it's a mixture. But you see those rare beings, you see, beloved, who have done the soul work, who have made those changes, made those adjustments, adaptations in their life, where they're able to function in a higher level of consciousness that we call love. What is love other than the behavior that automatically flows when you see the oneness and the connectivity that you have with others? You see. Now, I'm getting off of the high level now. Here I'm going down lower here, okay? When you're able to sacrifice for somebody, I mean, think about it. This is very interesting. What is stopping you from loving like that? What is it about you that prohibits you, prevents you from loving like that? Right now. Why can't you love like that? Why aren't you able to impact people's life like that? What's missing?
Unconditional.
Yeah, that could be part of it, you see. But there's something missing in your point of view.
The understanding of the oneness.
Something like that, but I don't want to be just an answer man here. I want to provoke some discussion, you know? Because at the end of your life, when you're laying in the coffin, whose life would you have touched like that? And if you have not touched somebody's life like that, then what have you done? So what you got to begin to see, beloved, is that, first of all, is loving others the purpose of your life? See, that's not wishful thinking. It's not poetry. It's not psychology. It's not philosophy. A life like that happens because it was intentional. You know what I mean? There are those people, beloved, who has decided to devote and live their lifetime for the sake of loving others. Then there are those who have devoted their lifetime in living for the sake of being loved by others. And the difference is vast. So the question ultimately becomes, what have you decided to do with your life? Of all the millions of things you can do with your lifetime in living, and there are many things you can do with this human lifetime, you see, what have you decided to do with yours, you see? See, the sacred life is also an option. But the sacred life is very different. You see, the sacred life is a lifetime devoted to being food for others. You see, being a source of compassion for others. You see, yes, beloved.
You're using the word others as opposed to family to make some other aspects come into mind. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
It is.
Beyond family, you know what I mean? Because taking care of your children, that's just human. That's ordinary. That's conventional. You see, I'm talking about devoting your lifetime to something greater than just your own self-aggrandizement, your own self-glorification, your own self-pleasurization, so forth and so on. For some of the cooling groups, I've offered a consideration to that very point. What would you use your lifetime for? I mean, it's a serious consideration. Because you have the capacity to love just like that person that you admire. You have that same capacity. What is stopping you? Why isn't that happening? What's the difference?
Like you say, Bruce, it's almost impossible, but at the same time, it's possible. You know, 'cause
We'll stay away from the higher metaphysics because I want to stay kind of right down here where you at, in operating in your reality. You see, you have an opportunity. You can choose whether you will use your lifetime in living for your own sake, just for you, just for your self-gratification, just for your self-pleasurization, just for your self-preservation. You see? Or you can use your human lifetime for something greater. See? And your choice in that matter will determine whether you will have the bhakti effect on others or not. You're not going to be breaking nobody's heart with bullshit. And philosophy. Philosophy don't break hearts. You know what I mean? Lectures don't break hearts. Follow what I'm saying? Psychology breaks no hearts here. You see? And if you want to live a life of breaking hearts wide open, you see, really giving other people the experience of their own inherent divinity, you see, giving them an experience more profound than merely giving them your respect. You see, giving others respect is one thing. Giving other people love, that's a whole nother level. Are you with me?
yes, sir.
Giving people respect, you just need to be polite. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not diminishing that. It has its place. But being polite and respectful is not equal to giving that person the experience of being loved, giving them the experience of their own inherent worth and value, giving them the experience that they worth my sacrifice for their sake. Are you with me? That's going somewhere else. But none of that becomes possible until you have really sat down and made a conscious decision about what you're going to use your lifetime in living for. So you can't get around that. That's the foundation. You got to decide whether you're even going to live a spiritual life. Because when we're talking about being loving toward all sentient beings, being loving, we're talking about a spiritual life. We ain't talking about a worldly life. We're not talking about a life devoted to the gratification of your own ego and the fulfillment of your own ambitions and self-preservation and self-pleasurization. That's a worldly life. You see, when you start talking about love, there is love of the romantic species that you see in poetry, and then there's the love that annihilates your ego. Which are you going to pursue? Which love do you want to do? Do you really want to get involved in the love that annihilates you? Or do you want to get involved in the love that glorifies you? Choose. Most people are seeking to be lovers for the sake of glorifying themselves, not sacrificing themselves, not becoming food. You see? Very different. Jesus says somewhere in Scripture that a man, something like that one has no greater love for his neighbor than to lay down their life. You see? That's different. That's a kind of different love Jesus is talking about. That's self-annihilating. You see my point? The more you're loving kills your ego, the closer you are approximating the kind of love the mystics are talking about. Where's the sacrifice?
So, Bruce, can you give away all your time?
It's up to you. I mean, it's not what is and what is not. The question is what you are willing to do.
Right, but then if say you give in all this time and energy, what about the time and energy for the practice then?
That is the practice. See, what you have to understand, and you asked a good question, because what really happens is that we limit spiritual practice to formal meditation.
Yes, sir.
Formal meditation is to support the real spiritual practice. You got it? You do your formal practice to support the higher practice. And what is this higher practice? It's just what we're talking about. See, you got to work on opening up that other dimension. There's a dimension of your being where you can be loved. You're just not living in that dimension. You're living out of the lower levels of your own possibilities and dimensions. You see, the spiritual process is really about something very different from just sitting in a corner for a couple of hours a day. That is to support the practice. You see, the practice is to basically be love. Basically. But that's a higher level of consciousness. That's coming from a very different place now. You see, Jesus talked about the fact that this little light of mine, you got some light, but is it shining on anybody? What's the contribution you're making? Are you living on the contribution side of life, or are you on the useless side of life? What is this? What's going on? What is it? What is it that you are doing with your life? Now, really now, seriously, what is it that you're doing? What you living for? Really, seriously now. What are you doing with this human lifetime? What are you living for? What is it that you really are up to? You got to find yourself out. You see? And are you really living for the sake of the welfare and the benefit of others? Or are you living for your own sake and for your benefit and the hell with others? And you got to get straight. You see? Do you even want to live a spiritual life? Because the reality, beloved, is this, that you're only going to do sadhana, and you're only going to involve yourself in spiritual practice to the degree that you have decided to devote your lifetime and live it to the spiritual goal. If you have not decided to use your lifetime and live it for a spiritual purpose, you're not going to do very much sadhana. That's just the reality. Because sadhana is not relevant to what you up to. You see my point? You might do enough sadhana so that you can arrogate to yourself the notion that I'm a spiritual person. But that's about your own self-glorification. You know, you tell people I meditate. Yeah, but you meditate once every 6 months. And then you sleep through that. There's nothing spiritual about that. You're just dabbling in spirituality for the sake of self-glorification. You follow what I'm saying? You're into impressing other people. That ain't it. You know. So you have to actually, and I've said this, and Mukherjee, I haven't forgot your question. I have offered those who in the Kula process, particularly the Kula, the Grace Kula, I mentioned to you, Rascal, pick precepts. Take some teaching of the Dhamma and then live that. That's what you should be doing. Your formal practice helped you to do that. You see, the Dhamma is more than just sitting in the corner. There's many teachings that makes up this Dhamma. Is that about right? Is that right? Find one. Just take one teaching of the Dhamma and then apply that. Practice that. Then when you get good at that, then you take another teaching and you practice that. And so forth and so on until you have now converted your whole life into that. Are you all understanding where I'm coming from?
Yes, sir.
Now let's say the practice of ahimsa, right? Well, ahimsa is not just vegetarianism. Are you with me? Yes. That's a very narrow, limited understanding of what it means to practice himself. You follow me? Practice not harming other people. Go practice that. People are already hurting enough. Why you need to be harming people with your word, thoughts, and deeds? You don't need to be hurting other people. You see? Go practice that. What you're practicing is trying to keep people from hurting you. Anti-Dharma is what you're practicing. I mean, is that about right?
Yes, sir.
Am I right or wrong? You use your formal practice and informal meditation as a means of supporting your practice of the teachings. That's the right order. You don't just do meditation and then you don't practice no teachings. That's not it. That's not it. You follow me? That's a ritual you're doing. That's religion. That ain't what this path is about. So you select a teaching, one that resonates with you. There's a whole slew of teachings, isn't it? Just pick one. And then really go practice that. You see? Practice the himself. Practice compassion. Practice it. And you'll see the difference that you make in others' life and in your life as well, you see. I don't know if I'm making any sense here. I hope I'm trying my best here. You see. That's genuine practice. Yes, beloved.
I'm apologizing from now for asking these questions, but they worry me. So, like how you say about we're trying to protect ourselves. Aren't we supposed to protect ourselves in the same sense? Because say I live on the west side.
I live an exception from west side. That's a different teacher. That's a different teacher from west side. That's not the teacher for the west side. West side though, right? The shield.
I'm not making fun of the west side, but you know, you can't really actually do stuff for some people, you know. So, and you know, it's kind of hard to love some people. because either it's because of my perception or my fears. It projects a different image of what I'm actually seeing. So it kind of block the love that or the compassion that you could try to give.
Right. Well, you see, the practice of the teachings is not conditional on the people. Are you with me? It had nothing to do with the people. You see, it's your practice. You see, it's coming from a different place. Are you with me? Very different.
Right. So there's no picking and choosing.
No cherry picking. Because it is something you are doing. It's the way you are. It's like a rose emits its aroma. It does not discriminate. It doesn't try to say, well, oh, here come a dog to smell me. I ain't going to release my fragrance. I'm going to hold it for the poets. It doesn't work like that. Sweetness is its nature. I used to always say that this kind of sweetness has to become your nature. It's not something, you see, that is conditional. You see, something that you're turning on for different people, you turn off for other people. He's saying you got to become the truth. See the difference?
Okay, so this now is a real way out example. Say we come to the Sangha and we'll hug somebody, and you're on the street and some dirty person on the street. Are you gonna hug that person?
No, see, you're not understanding me. You're looking for a way to act.
Yeah. Okay.
This ain't no act.
Right.
follow what I'm saying? Hugging, don't hugging, I mean, you're looking for some kind of definitive action to define whether or not you are or not being loving. You see, if I hug somebody, I'm being loving. That doesn't mean you're being loving,
Right.
just because you hug. You follow what I'm saying?
And because you don't, that
And
don't-
because you don't hug somebody, doesn't mean you're not being loving. See, we don't get into all of that.
Okay.
You see, that's superficial.
Okay.
You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
Stay deep. Mukuji Densadata.
You had mentioned something in our feedback to Akula about, there was two things. You were talking about how this is, how the sadhana is rooted in a response, and how when that is lacking, it's because the goal is lacking. And those were two key things about it, in that when you have an object and you're responding to being loved by that object, then the goal soars. And when you're not able to appreciate that, then you be reduced back down to just being superficial.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's another way of looking at it. What I'm trying to suggest to you all is something that is so very basic and fundamental. What does it mean to devote your lifetime for a spiritual purpose? What do that really mean? What are the facets of a spiritual life? What are we talking about? What is all of this? You see, when you say I'm trying to become a spiritual person and live a spiritual way of life, what exactly are you talking about? I mean, you got to get clear here. You know, not with cliches. Clarity is required. What do you mean by all of that? You see? What does all of that entail? How does that look? You see, you got to go into all of that. Now we have the example in the testimony of these great realizers and saints, you see. So it's not that we're without help in reaching this kind of clarity, you see. But it has to be some clarity. You cannot define the spiritual way of life to just a couple of hours of meditation. Not to say that that's not required, that is required. But you can't reduce spiritual life to that. You follow what I'm saying? That's not enough. Now, if you go very deep into this thing, it seems that you are only capable of living a spiritual life to the degree that you are able to live in the other dimensions of your being. It's really interesting. That without understanding yourself in a very, very profound way, then how will you live a spiritual life? The spiritual process, that process of transformation, you see, seems to be driven by the degree to which you are able to expand your being beyond just the gross level. The more you can move into these, as Teresa called them, interior castles, the more you can move into your other dimensions, to that degree, you are able to become more spiritual, you see. Because with that interior movement comes greater understanding, you see. Now, I've said just for the practice of hymns, I mean, to really understand, to really observe yourself, to observe others, to see people are hurting. That's their condition. You follow what I'm saying? People are hurting. You see, people are suffering. You see. Seeing that, why in the world would you hurt somebody? So I don't want to take you too far to just little things. If you could just get that teaching going, you follow what I'm saying? It doesn't say that you're going to rescue everybody from their suffering. Notice, I'm not saying that, am I? No. I'm not saying you're going to go out here and rescue the world from suffering. Suffering is inherent here. What I'm saying is see it and don't contribute to anything to that. That's a real practice. And it'll take a minute to get good at it. You will make mistakes, you see, but that's using your life for a purpose higher than hurting somebody. Do you want to use your life for a purpose greater than hurting somebody? Yes or no?
Yes.
You see. That's what it gets down to. Do you want to use your lifetime in living for a purpose higher than exploiting others? Yes or no?
Yes.
You see? But that's what you got to practice. See? It's not religion. It's not a matter of one clinging to some dogma, a doctrine. You see? It's not about believing in the truth. It's about becoming the truth. And the difference is vast, don't you think?
Yes.
But you got to go decide what you're going to do with it. Are you going to use your lifetime in living for the sake of impressing other people so that they will admire you and glorify you? Is that what you want to use your lifetime in living for? Because this thing is on a clock. It comes to an end. You only have so much time and so many breaths in this gross dimension. Now the question is, what do you want to do with your gross dimension? Do you want to use it in such a way that it moves you to deeper and deeper levels of your being? I mean, what do you want to do here? You want to use your lifetime in living for feeling sorry for yourself, if that's what you want to do? I mean, really, let's get down to business here.
Yes.
You follow what I'm saying? Because you say one thing and you live another way. You see. And at some point in your life, you see, you're going to have to deal with these contradictions straight ahead, or you're going to be deluded, right? Coming to the spiritual path, initiation means a new beginning. What's your new beginning? What became new for you when you got initiated? Other than you have a new way of eating, new way of talking, new way of dressing. You see, that's not much change, don't you think? Underneath that is just the same old riding. You see my point? Ego-driven, self-gratifying person, basically. See, it's going to all be over with in a while.
Yes, sir.
What are you going to do? You see? And I think Daya Sabi said something beautiful. It would be nice at the end of our lifetime if people could bear witness that here lies so-and-so, so-and-so, right, Africa. You see? And we bear witness. This person, you see, used their lifetime for a purpose much greater than just their own self-aggrandizement. And then tell stories about, examples of that. You see? Stories about when so-and-so, right, Africa loved me out of a crisis. You see my point? Another come before the congregation or the audience and then tell another story, you see, of being saved by the loving kindness of so-and-so, right, Africa. You see? Not claims you make with your mouth. You follow me? But confessions from those who entered into your Buddha field, your force field, your love field. You follow what I'm saying? No tricks. You follow what I'm saying? The Pharaoh Pepe said that he did that sacred living so well that in the course of his entire lifetime, he never hurt one single human being. That's tight. That's tight.
I've never been afraid of it.
Never even been afraid of him. Tight. You see? Decide. I mean, decide. You got to go decide here. I'm not going to decide for you. You're going to decide. What you going to do with this thing here? You want to be famous? You want to use your lifetime for the sake of becoming famous? You know what I mean? I want to become I better not say it. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people use their lifetime for the sake of trying to become famous. They want to walk that red carpet. They want to be in the magazine. They want to be on television. You see, they want to be famous. Is that what you want to do with your life? And you can use your lifetime for the sake of executing your worldly duties, taking care of your wife, taking care of your children, doing the dutiful thing. Yeah, okay, good. But is that all that you want to do with your life? Is to husband your wife, wife your husband, raise your children, be a good employee, a good employer, a good citizen? Not to say that there's anything wrong with any of that. That's just being human, you see. But do you want to, or is there a greater purpose of life than to merely raise your children? You got to go and figure this out for yourself. But I will tell you this, if you have decided after careful reflection that what you will use your lifetime for is for some higher purpose, something that is related to this Dhamma. If you have decided that, you see, then what there is for you to do is sadhana. And everything else has to be made to serve sadhana. And that's how that goes. Everything you're doing, somehow or another, has to become made in the service of or means to sadhana, bringing this inner light out. That's all sadhana is making manifest your own inherent divinity, bringing out into actual time, space, your own inner divinity, giving people that in you which is divine. You see, giving others my divinity. You see, sharing that divinity. You see. Yes, beloved.
Siddhartha next.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mensa, keeping the order. Siddhartha, I stand corrected.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to say anything because so much of what you say in response to everybody else's question is kind of tied into what, but what I was thinking is that one of the things that has become stronger and stronger for me, just more and more recently, is in answering that question, what am I going to use my life for, and what am I going to use sadhana for? The gift of all this time and energy and effort that has been given to me. When you work in a field where you quote unquote helping, so many of us are in these different kind of fields, and I think one of the things that this path has and is continuing to help me to understand is what is that really about, because there's so many things in different ways and mythologies about helping and being in the helping field. And I I'm still really trying to even more now refine it because I realize I don't have as much time now. But, you know, all of us in this room happen to have black skin, better or for worse, whatever that means. But, so, you know, helping the people, right, and saving the people and so on and so forth, whatever. But what I have been faced with and continue to try to understand, you know, even to say something like that, you don't even, you know, these people, you talk about suffering, the level of behavior that comes with people who are suffering, that you were supposedly trying to help. And your brother was talking about, you know, being offended, how people act, you know, that can run you away from that which you are supposed to be trying to do, even to quote unquote help the people, because the people are capable of a level of behavior that can sometimes be beyond comprehension. Our people, per se. And if you're gonna get in the mix, if you don't have some understanding, and whatever understanding I have of that is coming from you and from this past. I'm not just saying because it's true. It's been 15 years now, so it is what it is. But if not, you'll get eaten alive trying to help the people. If it's not coming from a place way beyond thank you, gratification, so on and so forth. So I'm still trying to use the sadhana to help me to refine just that, because that seems to be where a lot of my time is spent.
Well, you see, beloved, there's no substitute for personal conviction. See, one has to be convicted about what you're going to use your lifetime on living for. You see? And you're not in control of who will be helped and who will not be helped. That's none of your business. You see, you ain't got it like that. You follow me? Something else far greater than what you're doing is in charge of all of that business. You see, your job is, if the spiritual way of life is to first do no harm. If you say you're in the helping business, no matter what phase of it is, that industry you're in, whether it's medicine, psychology, first rule of any kind of helping others profession is first do no harm. That's it, right? But that has to be your conviction across the board. And it also has to include your wife, your children, your neighbor, the bus driver, the mailman. Otherwise, you are confusing a livelihood with a way of living. And most people do that. You follow what I'm saying? That's a livelihood. You're getting paid. Don't get it twisted. You see my point? Now, if you are out here doing that with no income, no salary, that's another story. But you're getting a check. You paying rent. It's livelihood. Be a good worker, and I'm not disputing that. Do well on your job. But that ain't silent. It's livelihood. You follow me? And you have to be clear. So sadhana is way beyond that. You follow what I'm saying? And your sadhana will influence how you work in your career. You see my point? It will have it. It's just a natural effect. You see? Because you are also a part of the therapy that you do with a client. Who you are is a part of the therapy process. You see? You remember, it used to be a time in naive stages of science that people actually thought they could set up an experiment and observe it, and that there was a separation between the observer and that which is being observed. But even in quantum, they know that's not true. The observer is a part of the experiment. Well, in some sense, you see, the therapist is a part of the therapy. So the better you are, the more spiritual you are, then the more you're able to do that. And there's people who are not even trained in the industry, in the business, are far more effective in transforming human beings than all of the PhD psychologists and clinical psychologists combined. Because their relationship to people is coming from a place way way beyond theories and models and protocols. It's coming from the heart. Right? So in some sense, you see, the spiritual way of life is a way of life lived from the heart. You see, and it's got to be based on that higher thing. You see, and it's not about how people treat you. That's more ego. Are you in this for how people treat you? Or are you in it for a higher purpose? You see? See, that's the seeking some kind of glorification. You see? Oh, Satsita, you're such a wonderful person. Look how you helped me carry my bag across the street. Hey, Satsita, that's not it. You're not in that moment governed by a principle beyond your own self-gratification, you see. It's just more self-glorification, doing it for applause, for recognition, etc., etc. You see. It is not you just being you, period. So I can go on and on and on. I don't know if we're going to make any headway at it. I thought, though, that it would be interesting to at least offer you all that to consider. You see, those who are not in a Kula group, you might want to start really considering some things, you see. That's what it means to get straight, you see. Yes, Bhagwan.
You know, Bhagwan, when Ma was living, when I got a chance to see and experience with this thing called love, I found out that I had to get out of the way in order to see, every time I kept getting in the picture, I was bringing my likes and dislikes. And it had gotten to a point where that junk wasn't working. I wasn't serving her in the manner that I needed to serve her. You know, it had gotten where she, you know, couldn't use the washroom. So it wasn't even about me liking to do what I had to do for my, I had to do it no matter what. And so I just found out when I was just, you know, loving Ma, I had to get out of the way in order to give the kind of love that she needed. Because like I said, when I was involved in it, which, you know, I still was, but I got a chance to see what I was bringing to the table. And mine was those conditions based on, do I want to do this or I don't want to do it. And I found out none of that junk meant anything. I just had to do it no matter what.
Well, that's even something to consider. What does loving somebody mean? What really, when we talk about loving somebody, what are we talking about here? You know, I mean, really. You see. Am I loving somebody if I'm hurting them? Maybe. There's some people into that, right? Right? You see. You may be hurting them for a higher purpose. You see.
Yes.
But here I'm meaning, are you really consciously, deliberately hurting somebody? And are you, you know, what is that? You know, I mean, really. When you're loving somebody, is that a response to a certain recognition about this person? Or is it just mechanical? I mean, these are the things to consider, because you're saying, okay, you want to be a body, you want to be a lover. Okay, that's great, but you have to understand, that's a big thing. You see my point? If you're talking about becoming a lover, becoming a bhakti, becoming this spiritual person that's going to be doing this thing called love in the world, that's some deep stuff here. You got to really understand what that's all about, what that looks like. That's skill way beyond the capacity of most individuals, you see. Loving somebody, what does that really consist of? What is that? What's the dynamics of it? Even the psychodynamics of loving somebody. What is that? What has to happen in you first before you can even love somebody? What has to happen?
You have to be loved.
You see? Yeah, I mean, Yeah, 'cause what are you using as a standard by which you are able to discern whether or not what you're doing is love or not? What is your reference point? I mean, come on, you have to go into this thing here. Now, if I'm hurting somebody and I know I'm hurting somebody, I ain't loving that person, am I? No. I ain't loving nobody. If I'm exploiting that person for the sake of my own self-gratification and self-preservation and so forth, that ain't loving nobody, is it? What does that really mean? What do that really look like? I mean, you gotta go.
Have a reason to love someone?
If you got a reason to love them, is that even loving?
No.
Because loving may have no reason, you know. I don't know. I am simply putting focusing question out there because when you start talking about love, we're back to the mystery now. You follow what I'm saying? We're back into mystery, the mystery zone. But you really got to look at that, you see. And all of these kind of things are derivative and byproducts of that fundamental consideration of what you're going to use your life and living for. So when you get into that, all of this begins to come out. Yes, beloved.
Oh, yes. I was thinking about when your best way that you put about the aroma from the flower. And she mentioned about, do you have to have a reason to love someone? And I equate the love with the aroma. I mean, how can the aroma go away? In other words, I'm saying the aroma is going to always be there. The aroma is, and so is the love. Love is. It's not a thing where you're, you know, it does not go away. And it's not something that, you know, I'm going to love if this, that, or the other.
Right.
The love is already there.
Always already the case.
Always the case, right.
Well, I think again in the Bible, it says it, the golden rule. You see. Don't do to others what you would not want others to do to you. If you could, if there was one teaching out of the Bible that anyone should keep, it's that one. If you disregard all other teachings in the Bible, and just that one, that's it. In fact, this teaching of the golden rule is the essence of all religions, no matter what they are. They got different ways of going about it, but fundamentally, that is the guideline for the sadhana of love that most of these great realizers have done. You see, do not do to others what you would not have others do to you. That's Rabbi Halid's version of it. And then live like that. That's Dhamma. That's a teaching. Okay, go try to practice that and use your sitting meditation to support that practice. You see, then you might be able to really get into that state of mind and consciousness from which love happens. You see, love flows from a certain state of consciousness and a state of mind. You see. And without that kind of disposition, you are not going to be able to love. So how would your life look, live from, and governed by that principle that is the golden rule? How would that change the dynamics of your interactions with others? You don't want others to hurt you, right? So you don't hurt others. In the piece that you all was considering on the power of judgment, the sutras, the excerpt from the Kalama Sutras, right? And it says there what Buddha instructed his son Rahula, you see, before he acts, consider whether the consequences of those actions will harm himself or others, and if so, don't what? Don't do that. That's a teaching. Go practice that. Yes, beloved. Yes. Yes, sir.
I was just going to comment on love.
Yes.
Yesterday we were at a meeting and one of the things they brought up was about the image of man. God created man in his image, but God didn't have a body. He was spirit. And man, the spirit within his flesh, was an image not related or that looked like what God looked like until he became corrupt. And so he could no longer see himself the way he was supposed to see himself. In Luke 8, verse 11, the scripture says, now the parable is this: the seed is the word of God, which leads me to believe that I have a womb here and I have a womb here. From here the woman comes, and from here I give birth to knowledge. And so the spirit is both inherent and acquired. And I can see Jesus sitting at the table and he's taking this bread, which he says is his body, and he's breaking it. The body has to be broken. And he's feeding others. Love is so that humanity can exist. And so that what God, who is a farmer, I think I heard somebody say something about husbandry, that which he intends to keep will be preserved by that love. And then one last thing, the scripture says that, I think it's 9:26 of Luke, where it says, he's talking to us, he says, if you intend to follow after me and be my disciples, he says you have to take up your own cross. And I determined that the cross was not a piece of wood that I put on my back, but the cross was the word itself. For if I were to follow that word, then I would end up with some of the same struggles and the same problems that caused him to say, oh my Father, if it be thy will, you know, let this cup pass from me. But then the scripture says, you know that you love me when you do the will of the divine.
That's wonderful. That's very beautiful. I think you summed it up very beautifully in words that all of us probably have had the chance to read in the course of our lifetime. So that's well said. You see, I cannot really improve upon that, you see. That energy that sustains the entire species is love. Because none of us would be sitting here if somebody didn't love you. And when you lose the experience of being loved, you usually blow your brains out. You see? So it's psycho, it's physical, it's many dimensions. There's many dimensions to it. There's a love that is incomprehensible. Cannot even be represented in a symbol. The Eucharist is full of metaphor, isn't it? But I like the point that you made out of Luke about you got to take up this cross, right? Which means that the spiritual life is not a party at your auntie's house. Follow me? It's not purpose to console you. It says that to live a life of love, you got to be willing to be wounded, to suffer. That's a profound thing. Have you always recall a moment in your lifetime where you were willing to suffer for the sake of somebody? Maybe in those moments you have a better understanding of what love is about. So, those moments when you know you were willingly ready to suffer for somebody.
I thought if first you were talking to me when you said that. But there was a scripture, and the scripture says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world, for if any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. But everything that's in the world, God created himself. And the only problem that we're ever going to have in this world is the problem of the way that we think. And when we fall in love with the things that God has created, then we find ourselves as creatures having an involvement with things that God has created more than the Creator himself. Thereby we have an inability to be able to love others to the point of death, or giving them our lives as though it was bread, because we are addicted to the things in this world.
Right. You actually start thinking the things in this world belongs to you. And nothing here belongs to you. And then when you go to a deeper level of your being and look at it from that perspective, then the whole thing turns topsy-turvy. Then it becomes a paradox. You see, the Eastern point of view is just the opposite of the Occidental, where the Eastern point of view becomes everyone and everything is God. And if you don't love these others, you cannot love God. You follow me? That love of others, you see, is the love of God. I mean, it gets deep, even rocks and trees, because in Hindu philosophy it says, Nasivam vidyate kavasi, there is nothing that exists that is not God. That you're not going to find anything that is not God here. Everything is God. You see my point? So it's as I said before, it's inscrutable, you see. But you're only responsible for what you can understand. You follow what I'm saying? Just go where you at. And that's good enough. But the golden rule is a good starting point for everybody. Don't you think? Yes, beloved, and you have the last word.
Matthew, my particular delusion requires that I stay real practical for stuff. So that, I mean, there's two examples of people that I've seen exhibit the kind of love you talk about, and that's yourself and Tobe Fulford. And when Dial was talking about how people were talking about at his funeral, the kind of person that he witnessed, I thought about, you know, what happened with Tobe Saab. And here's a man that didn't have Dharma and didn't have any of that, and yet he was a perfect shining example of what you're talking about. And so I have to go by for myself. I have to go by living models and something real practical, because you know where I'll be. You know.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
You see, and that's why I said that it's a whole different kind of criteria that doesn't necessarily require the person to have all of this and all of that. You know what I mean? It's just it comes from somewhere deeper. You see. It's just, Maharaj used to always say that the closer you get to that state of mind and consciousness that is love, the experience in your own psychology and emotions is one of heartbreak. You see, your heart begins to melt. You see, upon the suffering of others. You see, it impacts you. You follow what I'm saying? You become tender. And you can find those moments in your life where tenderness has had its place. Where you just can't stand to see no more suffering in the case of a particular person or situation. You see, usually somebody in our family. I mean, you mothers in the room, I mean, you are wonderful examples of it, you see. When the baby is sick and not feeling well, you see, that you go to that place inside of yourself as women, you know what I mean? And it's just remarkable to me, you see, what a mother would not do for the sake of the welfare and the benefit of her child. You see, that's why the love of a mother has been used almost as a standard by which you can measure yourself and measure others to see to what degree they have been able to move into that state of mind and consciousness called love. You see, the highest concept available to us as human beings of what love looks like is seen in that extraordinary spiritual relationship between a mother and a child that doesn't end with time. You see, very extraordinary. I remember Ronnie Kamari was telling me, this is interesting. I don't know if I have it right. You have to correct me. But I think Saranjan was somewhere. She was having a baby or something. Was she giving birth to Chris, and she was in pain and she was hurting. And that thing kicked in. And you said, he's hurting my baby. And she's having a baby. But you went to that place in yourself where that's still your baby. You see? And it brings out something fierce. It brings out, it's an extraordinary thing, you see. And Dias, I think that that's what you're referring to. When you see that operating, you know, there's something that is just so heartbreaking about it. It's so beautiful about that. You are moved to your tears by the impact of beauty. Have you noticed? Sometimes, whenever you're having the experience of something profound, something beautiful, something sacred, it makes you cry. You see, those are the tears of awe, you see. And there's no better place to see those kinds of sacrifices than within the context of mother and child. You see, it's just extraordinary, you see. It's just an extraordinary thing, you see. Just an extraordinary thing. That kind of dedication, unconditional dedication, you see. Sacrificing sleep, sacrificing comfort, you know, sacrificing their own self. I mean, so many mothers, I remember my grandma, you know, couldn't even get her hair did, you know what I mean? Spending giving Bilal and me all those nickels and dimes, you see? I mean, what is it that you cannot find about the love of a mother for a child that you will not find sung about and described in all of these scriptures, you see? See, other things are too abstract. You see my point? Very abstract. You have to have a lot of philosophical, abstract capacity, but this other thing, just look in your relationship with your mother. That's good enough. Study that, and you'll know something about it. You don't have to read this philosophy, that philosophy. Study that. Then you'll have some sense of what is required of you. It's a profound matter. And that changes you. A woman, before she has the child, is different after she has the child. Something change. You follow what I'm saying? Some of that selfishness is gone and reduced. You know what I mean? They get a siddha. You see, a kind of power that can make them hear in the deepest level of their sleep. You see, the baby whines just a little bit. They sit straight up. A kind of fierceness arises. You see. So you have to sit with that a while. You have to kind of not rely on words too much, you know. Let that feeling kind of sink into you. And you see, but Ronnie, right, even when you didn't want to do what Mataji needed done, there was the remembrance. You see. And that's what made you change your mindset. And let me just go ahead and do this here, because you remember something. from your own experience with her. When you became the beauty queen, boy. You see, she did your hair, put on your little makeup, boy. I mean, it was something. That's mama love. Right? So when you can give others more than mama loving, then you made it into the state of art. Yes, beloved.
Again, so often in case, I'm not quite sure how to word this, but I was wondering if you might comment on another aspect of race. And in this case, I'm just going to tell the same story, same funeral, but another man came up and he said, you know, I remember we were in a car with some buddies, they were driving to Alabama, and this huge storm came up. The wind and rain was just horrendous. And the driver just pulled over and said, you know, I'm really scared. I can't drive no further. So the person who's now deceased turned to the guy in the back seat and said, I think you can handle this. Will you move over? He told the driver to move over and let this person drive. So this person was speaking at the funeral yesterday, and he said, I couldn't believe he had that much faith in me. He said, I will never forget it. And it seemed as though he was conveying at that time in his life, he was going through issues where maybe there was loss of confidence, or maybe his abilities needed, you know, confirming. And I wondered, as I reflect, does grace give us situations and opportunities all the time to be a significant? You know, we don't have to know necessarily what's going on in the life of that other person, but if we respond in a way that our heart assures us is correct, then that's it. Just keep going.
Yeah.
This is how it really works.
That's how it works, you see. And what people always need is not more money. They always need more love. And grace is constantly giving you an opportunity to be its agency of love. That becomes the test of life. When you submit to allowing yourself to be used as an agency for this higher purpose and welfare and benefit of all sentient beings, you see, when you permit that to occur, then you are, in that moment, cooperating with this grace, taking advantage of this grace. It always gives us opportunity to practice love. You see, and the more you practice it, the better you become at it. You see. Grace is another one of those topics, you see, that takes us back into the mysterium. But those are forces that are involved in evolution to deeper and higher levels of our being. You see, it moves you. I mean, just think if we all could live at our capacity for love of others. This is paradise then. You know what I mean? But it must be heart-based. You know what I mean? Can't be ideological. You see, I was using the example of the mother's love because there's a connection between that mother and that child. That body, that's my body. See, there's no separation in that. You know what I mean? And you have to fight like hell to get control of your body from your mama. That's hard. You don't fix your hair like that. I mean, in her experience, that's my hair. That's my body. They're my bones. You follow what I'm saying? See, it's not ideological. You see, there is a connection, an identification, a feeling of oneness. You see, that's heart-based. You see my point? That's heart-based. And that's very different. It's very different, you know. It's a very different kind of love affair that is not of the mind, you see. There's the head, there's the genitals, and then there's the heart. It's the heart, you see. When that child is hurt, the mother feels it. I mean, she actually feels it. There's a connection that transcends space and time. See, as men, we have a hard time because the female in us has been so buried that, you know, they have to go through our heads. You see my point? And work itself down. But in women, it's very different. They understand the mystics talk about love. You follow me? They're in the loving business, so to speak. It just got to get elevated, expanded. But they got a sense of what the saints is talking about here. You see? The no fooling, no kidding type of love. You know, that is not grounded in and does not depend on a philosophy. You follow what I'm saying? It's not reinforced by a sutra or scripture. You see, you don't have to read nothing to do love. You see, it comes from somewhere else. And that's that thing. You see, that's it. Once that is expanded. And you see some mothers who are able to do that, you know, that they have moved further in their womanhood, where they are able to extend that feeling of care beyond the limitation of their families. You see my point? You see? Now it's there. You follow what I'm saying? The little kid down the block who's hungry, it's like her kid is hungry. Come on in, little boy. Gotta fix you something. See my point? Go get him some clothes, wash his face, take him in. You follow what I'm saying? Mothers him like it was her own. You see? That's expanding, that's growing, that's moving. You see? God's love is more like that. See? That is why God has been represented from the most ancient time in the form of female. Sophia, even in Christianity, Sophia, that was God. You see, before the patriarch concept of God came in. Because when they say God is love and put a man picture up there, that's going to confuse the hell out of you. You see, wait a minute, love, God is love, and then he got this beard, and you know what I mean? But the ancients understood, you know, you represent, if you're going to use any kind of anthropomorphic representation of God, that better be female. Because that's consistent. You know, not this long bearded guy up in the sky. Because it's more like that. So this is the proposition we will leave the room with today. You see, what it's going to be. So die your sob on that day that you are laying in your final resting place. It would be so good, you see, for those who are there on that occasion to be able to say about you all those things. You see. And you should live your life in such a way that that becomes possible, where it's not theater. You know, to really have touched that many people, you see. That's having made right use of your life, you see. You broke some hearts. All right, that's it. I think that's enough for today.
Love back.
What you've been looking for, right? What you gonna do with it? Are you gonna waste it? Just gonna talk about it? Give love a big clap.
What's wrong with my ears? They're deceiving me. I thought I heard you speak, calling my name. I must be insane. I just can't explain. What's come over me? What's come over me? What's floating on a cloud. What could this be? What's come over me? What's come over me? Oh, I love you so. Don't wanna let you go now. Hey, baby, baby, don't hold you love you, baby. Don't you wanna?
You see, I must have gone through some changes when I kissed your picture. And hey, my mind just keeps on wondering when you only left me yesterday. I've never been to heaven. Instead, I spent the night with you. Maybe that's the reason I don't know what to do. What's come over me?
Oh, baby, I love
What's come over me?
You're the sweetest thing I know. You dim the rainbow's glow. There's no power on this earth to separate us, baby. 'Cause you are my sunshine. When it rained on my parade, you were there to light the way. You're rare as a rose in winter. You're more than I deserve. 'Cause you are my sunshine. My darkest day, yeah. You are baby, it's you. Words like darling sweetheart forever. Girl, it's you I'll always adore. They only say I love you, but you mean so much more. 'Cause you are my sunshine.
like they say.